In this video, we're going to look at handling requests in Laravel 5. So to demonstrate this, I'm going to create a new view. The views directory is now under resources, by the way, and we'll just call this form.blade.php. We're going to open up a quick form. We're going to set the method to post. We're going to create a label, set this for name, and we'll have an input field, type equals text, name equals name, ID equals name. That'll do there, I think. Then we'll have a submit button. And we also need to have our token. So input type equals hidden, name equals token, underscore token, that's important. And value equals CSRF underscore token. That's a function. So the next thing that we need to do is create a controller. So inside HTTP controllers, we're going to create a new file. We'll call this request controller. In fact, no, we'll call it something less confusing. We'll say form controller. It's going to have the namespace of Acme, HTTP controllers. So class form controller, and it's going to extend controller. So we're going to have a public function index. In fact, we'll call this show form. And we're going to return view. By the way, in Laravel 5, instead of calling view make, you can simply call view as a function. Just makes things a bit more readable. So we're going to return view. I think we called it form. Yes, okay. So finally, we just need to add our roots. So in our roots file under our HTTP directory, I'm just going to remove some of this stuff here. I'll leave that home root there. Just to add a little separator. We're going to say root get /, which is basically just the default root. We're going to say form controller at show form. So let's refresh and see if this is working, which it is. Great. If we submit, we're going to get an error, a method not allowed HTTP exception. And that's because we only have a root for the GET request. We haven't actually added one for the POST request. So we're going to say root post form controller at post form. So we'll create that method now, post form, and we'll just dd input all. So let's refresh that. We'll enter our name and hit submit. We need to add a use statement for that since we're in a namespace directory. Hit refresh and there we go. We have the name that I entered and my hidden CSRF token. So validation. Previously, we'd have had to say validator equals new validator make. We'd pass in the input and we'd pass in an array of rules. So we'd say something like name is required. What else would we have? Well, that's it. Let's add a min rule of 3 and a max of 6. And then we'd say something like if validator fails, return redirect. And in fact, there's also a redirect function in Laravel 5. So return redirect back. You'd pass the input and with errors, pass in the validator. So you can see it's quite cluttered. And especially when you have lots of post requests, your controller is just going to be full of the same code, just with different rules. So Laravel 5 combats that pretty well. Let's just get rid of all of this. Now inside of our HTTP directory, we also have a requests directory. And all this contains for now is one abstract request class. So what we're going to do is we're going to use Artisan to generate a new request. So if we just list our help inside here. Here it is, make request. So PHP artisan make request, and we're going to set the name of the request, which would be form request. It would typically be the same as this. In fact, let's just make this a bit more readable, a bit more understandable, sorry. Name request. And you'll see that our request gets created here. So let's just clean this up. So now what you can actually do is enter your rules here. So we had name as required, we had min 3 and max 6, and then simply inject that request using the method injection that we looked at in the last video. So name request request, and we'll add a use statement for that. Use Acme HTTP requests name request. Down here we'll just echo your name is, and in bold we'll say input get name, and we'll add a little exclamation mark there. So if we submit now without entering anything, we should get something that's not that. So the problem with this is, if we go back to our name request, is that the user isn't authorized to make the request. So all we have to do is return true here. Typically what this would be used for is, for example, checking permissions. So if the request was to, let's say, create a user through an admin panel, you'd say something like return auth user is admin. And if the user isn't an admin, then they would get this forbidden message. But since we don't have that functionality in this application, we're just going to simply return true, hit refresh, and we get redirected back. Now we're not actually displaying any errors here, so let's change that. If errors, for each errors all as error, and for each, in fact we'll make this little list. So all, and we'll just leave that error. There we go. So we get the name field is required. If we enter something that's under 3 characters, we get this other error message, and if we enter something that's over 6, we should get the name must be under 6 characters, like so. So we did all of that by simply creating that class and injecting it through this method. Now if we enter something that will pass the validation and hit submit, all the code inside of that method gets executed. So obviously that's a much cleaner way of handling requests in Laravel 5.